Eep. The sharks are falling. The sharks are back. That'd be a very elaborate hairstyle. What did you do? I curled my hair into sharks. Time to talk about a mermaid princess, hence why I have my Little Mermaid shirt, because Shirahoshi is to a degree based off of Ariel from The Little Mermaid / just Little Mermaid in general, in regards to the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, although I would say Shirahoshi's is a bit less dark to a degree, because they both have dark elements to it, considering her mother and other stuff, and Little Mermaid in regards to the original Hans Christian Andersen story is very, very dark. In the end. But sharks, Pitbull trying to figure out what the heck this is. Okay. So, time to talk about Shirahoshi. Go over there. Please don't fall. They're very precariously placed at the moment. Today I am going to be talking about Shirahoshi, and for the moment finishing up my Ryugu Kingdom Royals videos. Shirahoshi is the youngest of the Ryugu Kingdom Royals. She is, of course, the mermaid princess, the daughter of King Neptune and Queen Otohime, and the younger sister of Fukaboshi, Ryuboshi, and Momboshi for the three Neptune princes. She is also the current incarnation of the ancient weapon Poseidon. And that means that she has the ability to... What are you doing? Aw, I was going to try to get a picture of you looking cute. Are you looking cute? Are you trying to be cute? I always cute, mommy. Yeah, I know you're always cute. Also a pain sometimes, but that comes with any animal. Shirahoshi is, of course, the current incarnation of Poseidon, which of the ancient weapon Poseidon, which of course allows her to communicate with the sea kings that live around Fishman Island, and that also, technically, I would assume she'd be able to communicate with all of them. It just depends on how many of them are smart enough to listen to her. Like, the very, very ancient ones probably would be. The younger ones, maybe not. Just depends. Shirahoshi is 16 years old. We know that this applies to a prophecy that Charlie made to Roger and Neptune and Odin and such back when Roger came through Fishman Island for the last time and everything, about that there will be a mermaid princess born in so many years and everything, and she will have the power of the ancient weapon. And Charlie was right about that. And of course, Shirahoshi, she is also the same age as Rebecca and I believe Vivi. I believe all three of them are supposed to be the same age. I would have thought Vivi was 16 when they met her, but unless I'm getting my dates wrong, I thought Vivi was 16 when the Straw Hats met her and that she was 18 now. But I thought that was correct. I could have been wrong. I don't remember. It's been a while since I did the Vivi video. Any of the Vivi videos. We know throughout the beginning of the Fishman Island arc, when we're first introduced to Shirahoshi in the Hardshell Tower, that she is, that despite her giant size, she has this very fragile personality, and that she tends to cry very easily at the drop of a hat. So her and Izuku Midoriya would get along very well, as would her and the water elementals from Elemental. They would all get along very well, and they would all just cry, and cry. And they would all be very happy about it. But Shirahoshi has some reasons for why she is, of course, this way. There's, of course, losing her mother when she was very young. There's, of course, the fact that because of Vanderdecken, that her life has been under threat for the past, 6 years or so. And she's had to live within the Hardshell Tower to prevent him from being able to hit her with the weapons that he sent at her with his Mark fruit and everything. Stupid devil fruit. And such. So she has those reasons, and it's not like she's completely isolated from the outside world. She still has her father and brothers and her pet shark Megalo. there, and like the different ministers of the right and of the left come and visit her and everything. So it's not like she's alone, but she's also very still fairly isolated because she only interacts with a certain amount of people. And she also is somewhat naive, but she wants to learn about the world. And we see that throughout the course of the Fishman Island arc. And of course, by the end of the arc, she has definitely shown that she has bravery in her when she stands up to the Noah to try to protect the island and everything, to try to lead Noah away from the island. She tries to stand up to Horty to a degree. So she is definitely showing that she has, courage in her, and Luffy, of course, ends up, being her friend. Of course, he still calls her Weepy Hoshi, of course, pretty much throughout the entire arc, which is fair. She cries very easily. But we see the friendship develop between the two of them. In regards to some of her abilities and powers, she is, of course, the daughter of Neptune, so she, of course, has power as a royal of the Ryugu kingdom, and everything has a level of authority there. Same thing that her brothers would have, but we don't really see her use that at any point in time, as far as I'm aware. She is a giant mermaid. She is, I think, a giant smelt fish, I think is what she was, or is that what that was what she was? She's a smelt whiting mermaid, smelt whiting, whatever. She's that type of a mermaid, which the fish is actually very small, so her being that large is just very funny. And such. But also in regards to her powers and abilities, she of course has the power of Poseidon, where she has the ability to communicate with the Sea Kings. We see this first activated when her mother is threatened by Milzigard, and then we see this activate again much later during the Fishman Island arc, when they use it to save the Noah from landing on the island and everything. And hopefully she's been practicing with her power since then. She also has hockey. She has the observation hockey that is very similar to what her mother had. And so she has the ability to connect with people's hearts very, very strongly, the way that Otohime could. So we kind of see those demonstrated throughout the story. Going into the actual story. So, as I said, she's 16 years old, pretty much from her childhood. She's lived within the palace. She, of course, has gone out and about with her mother and her brothers and her father at times. We see during the flashback where we see Otohime coming home from being out preaching and everything, or doing her versions of demonstrations that are very peaceful. She comes home, and of course we see her with her sons and her daughter and everything, and Shirahoshi is a baby during a good chunk of that time frame. Baby turned into infant, toddler, blah 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 blah. As she grows up, she is doted upon by her brothers and her mother and her father, and she is just beloved by the whole kingdom. As she grows, we also see just how close all of them are as a family. And how much her and her brothers support Otohime's dream of having them be able to live in the world above. And of course, Shirahoshi likes to learn about the world above. She wants to go see a forest with actual trees in it and everything. So we have that there. And of course, kind of the big major event that happens is, of course, when Milzigard shows up, when his ship crashes into Fishman Island after Jinbei has become a warlord and the Fishman slaves from Marishwa have been freed. Milzigard shows up and he's trying to demand his slaves back, and of course Otohime protects him from his former slaves, and she's like, violence is not the answer, and eventually, she ends up having Milzigard is threatening her, and this causes Shirahoshi to activate her power for the first time and summon several Sea Kings. And they show up, and Milzigard faints, and that allows them to, protect the queen and everything like that. And then, of course, Otohime eventually does explain to the three princes about Shirahoshi's power, and they, of course, make the vow to protect her. But, of course, what also ends up resulting of this is, of course, Otohime ends up going to the surface all the way up to Marishwa with Mildegard, when he leaves to return back to the Holy Land, she goes with him in order to plead her case to possibly the Gorosei themselves, is what I'm thinking. So she may be one of the few people who has been granted an audience with the Gorosei. So she may have been into the Room of Authority. So I'm not sure. That's never quite explained, because if I did my math right, I don't remember if that lined up with a year for the Reverie. It may have, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But so Otohime goes up, and we have the time frame where we just have like the three princes and Shirahoshi just waiting for her to return. I went over a good chunk of this when I did, of course, the Otohime video, and of course when I did the Three Brothers video last week. So, different perspectives there if you want that there. Eventually, Otohime returns, which is a miracle considering other things we've learned very recently. In the manga, she returns, and she has this pledge that if they get enough signatures, they will work on trying to move Fishman Island or whatever up to the surface. So that is their goal, and of course the three, all four children are very happy to have their mother back and to have this opportunity. And over the next, I think it's over the next 2-ish years or so, they work on gathering up all of these different signatures and everything. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is one day, about, I believe it's 6 years ago, if I have my timeline correct, when they're in the giant plaza on Fishman Island, and they're gathering up all of these signatures, if they've gotten so many, suddenly it bursts into flames. And Otohime tries to save as many of the signatures as she can, but in the process ends up getting shot. During this time frame, amongst all this chaos, Vanderdecken, the ninth, has managed to make his way next to Shirahoshi. He taps her on the arm, and that means that he marked her with his devil fruit, and then he wears a glove on that hand for the rest, for the rest of the story. He wears a glove on his hand, so that way that hand is always set to, he can throw something at Shirahoshi and it will always find her. And then, while all of this is happening, Shirahoshi is watching as her mother ends up getting shot. And of course, I went over this very detailed to a degree in the previous video with the brothers, where Fukaboshi is very angry. All of them are rightfully angry about this, but Fukaboshi is the main one that's angry. But Ryoboshi and Momboshi go over, and to prevent Shirahoshi from screaming in her grief and her shock about what just happened to her mother, they start like dancing and trying to sing and like trying to get her to not, activate her power, because summoning Sea Kings to this are not going to help. And as I said, while they're doing this, the guards think that they've kind of cracked, which is fair. But they do manage to calm Shirahoshi down, and the four of them, along with their mother, manage to say one last goodbye to each other. So the four children manage to say one last goodbye to their mother by doing their little pinky promise thing. One more time, that the children will carry on their mother's legacy. And, there's a lot of that. And what ends up happening is, while all of this is happening, Megalo, her giant shark pet, come over here, shark. Her giant shark pet, I think I named him Sherman after Sherman from Sherman's Lagoon. But she has Megalo, and he actually ends up witnessing that it's Hordy is the one who actually shot Otohime, as opposed to it being the human pirate that gets blamed. And he eventually tells Shirahoshi what happened, because of course, just like all mermaid and fishmen, she can communicate with, or just like all mermen, at the very merfolk, she can communicate with fish, so she can communicate with him, and he tells her that. What ends up happening is, of course, she never tells anyone. Hi. I know. I love you. You get pets. You get petted. You get petted, baby girl. Baby Brenda, my baby girl. I love you. You're a good girl. You're my baby. I love you. Hi. Yeah, no, that's not gonna work. You're gonna fall. So back up. No. Back. I don't want you to fall. That would be bad. That would be very bad. I don't want you to fall and get hurt. Go lay back down. I don't want to. I want you to pet me. Well, I gotta do the video. I gotta keep talking about the mermaid. He's like, forget the mermaid. Give me love. I snuggled her already a lot this morning, and I snuggled her a lot yesterday, and I'm gonna snuggle her while I'm doing my editing on the video, so she will get snuggled. So do not worry about that. She will get plenty of affection. And then I have to go to the mall and look at Christmas trees with my sister and her kids. Which is fun. I will be putting up Christmas decorations soon. I kind of wanted to have them up already, but I've had other stuff that I've had to deal with over the last several days. And such. But what ends up happening is, of course, after that, you know, all of the love letters from Vanderdecken start showing up. First of all, dude, she's 10. She just watched her mother die. Learned to read the room. Learned to read the kingdom. And, of course, because of all the letters showing up, the three princes and her do not go to their mother's funeral. And the four children actually end up broadcasting at their mother's funeral that they will continue to fight for their mother's, bless you, that they will continue to fight for their mother's dream and fight so that way all of Fishman Island can live in the sun and everything. Live in the sun and be free and equal and everything like that. And eventually then we just, you know, the letters keep coming, and eventually they end up becoming attached to weapons, I think, and then they end up just becoming just weapons in general that keep getting thrown at Shirahoshi no matter where she is. I think they figure out that it is Vanderdecken, and then of course this is when they have to put Shirahoshi in the hard shell tower for, you know, the next 10 years or so for safety. So it was like either 10 years ago or 6 years ago, whatever it was, that everything happened with Otohime dying. I don't remember exactly what it was, but Shirahoshi gets locked away for the next however many years until present timeline, until the pre-time skip happen or the post-time skip begins. After that, we of course have it that, you know, the Straw Hats arrive and everything, and they end up at the palace, and Luffy ends up finding his way into Shirahoshi's room because he smells food and is following it, jumps around on her, ends up biting her, gets knocked away, realizes that it's actually a giant mermaid. Actually, earlier when they were first arriving at Fishman Island, they ended up saving Megalo from being eaten by the Kraken, by Sarume. And they saved him, so he actually told Shirahoshi about that. So now Shirahoshi kind of wanted to meet Straw Hat and everything, so eventually, you know, that happens. They end up meeting. He ends up eating a bunch of the food that's in there for her. And then, of course, they end up having this conversation where she explains, oh, yeah, I'm kind of trapped in here because there's weapons that get thrown at me, and I can't leave because they'll find me no matter where I go and everything. And what ends up happening is, of course, can I help you? Eventually, she asks Luffy if he would take her somewhere. And he agrees. And the way that he gets her out of the hard shell tower, which is hilarious, is, of course, they take Megalo. He opens his mouth. Shirahoshi just kind of goes inside, so her head is like right here, and Megalo looks like he is stuffed full. And they go out, and Luffy keeps, you know, knocking away any weapons that show up because his observation hockey at that point in time, while it's not future sight, is enough to be able to detect when these weapons are coming. So he keeps blocking the weapons and knocking them away or breaking them or whatever the case may be. Vanderdecken really needs to work on his courting ritual. He also just should be in jail anyway for multiple reasons. Very few are similar to Blackbeard trying to court Juri Bunny. Yeah, except worse. Well, actually, Blackbeard doing it is worse, but Vanderdecken was at least aware of Shirahoshi's actual age at the time. So neither one are particularly good at this point in time, but certain crime units need to be called about them. And of course, Shirahoshi, you know, Luffy has called her Weepy Hoshi already multiple times at this point in time. And, it's a thank you for letting her eat his food, for letting her, for her, for her letting Luffy eat all of her food. He's kind of helping her with this, which is, of course, another thing where it's just like, oh, a girl gave him food and he will end up helping save her country, which is, of course, later on what happens with Rebecca and Tama, and Dressrosa and Wano, respectively. So they end up going out, and he has snapped at her several times, which has made her cry several times. But they make their way out of the hard shell tower, and head off their way to the sea forest, so that way she can go and finally visit her mother's grave. And of course, I think that's explained that's where Jinbei is. I also believe that I don't know if this is ever explicitly explained. We know that Shirahoshi knows who Jinbei is because she, I believe, refers to him as Boss Jinbei as well. And of course, he knows who she is. That's not surprising. But I don't know if we actually know if Shirahoshi has met Jinbei before. Jinbei was at her mother's funeral, and as a warlord for a little while, he probably would have been in some form of communication with the king and queen, with Neptune and Otohime before everything happened. But I don't know if we know too much about how much Shirahoshi and Jinbei have actually interacted with each other prior to this moment in the sea forest where they end up, meeting. And Jinbei, of course, has one of the very best reactions where he's just like, oh, hi, Luffy. Hi, Shirahoshi. What? I love that with Jinbei. Where he just like freaks out and he's like, what are you doing here? Because he's aware of the weapons that are being thrown at her and why she was locked up in the hard shell tower to begin with. But of course, what ends up happening during a bunch of this stuff is, of course, all hell is breaking loose at the castle. And, Brook and Usopp and Zoro and Papagoo and everything are having to deal with stuff with the guards, and Nami's dealing with the guards, and eventually her and Kami end up escaping and end up meeting up at the sea forest with where Luffy and Shirahoshi are and everything with Jinbei, and eventually Chopper and Sanji end up there as well, because Sanji almost has like the massive way over the top nosebleed when he ends up seeing Shirahoshi, and Chopper tries to prevent him from seeing Shirahoshi and everything. And then, of course, during all this time frame is when Jinbei ends up giving Luffy and Nami and the others the explanation as to what happened in the flashback for Fishman Island, which is when all the stuff I already went over is revealed about Milzigard and everything else. Where we get that whole flashback and learn about Fisher Tiger and Otohime and all of that, and the history of the Fishman Island and the Ryugu Kingdom for the last couple of decades. Eventually, while this is happening, Vanderdecken has become enraged, and he is just finally just going to try to do what he can to either you're going to marry me or I'm going to kill you. So that's kind of what's going on there. So he just keeps sending more and more weapons, and Luffy keeps, intercepting them and destroying them and everything like that. Shirahoshi is, of course, able to finally visit her mother's tomb, which is a very nice moment. And then, of course, she ends up meeting Frankie and Din and Jinbei and everything like that. And, of course, she ends up meeting Nami. And because Nami has now heard the story of, Fishman Island and everything like that from Jinbei, Nami, and this is, of course, when Jinbei is revealing to Nami about stuff with Arlong and what happened there, and about how him and Arlong have a connected past and everything, and how Jinbei does apologize to Nami for the fact that he was part of the reason she suffered for so many years because of Arlong. And everything, and how that all ties together. And of course, Nami forgives Jinbei and everything, and she's like, I don't hate all fishmen, I just hate Arlong. I'm like, fair enough. So she doesn't hold it against, the whole fishman race and the mermaids and everything, which we've already noticed because she ended up not 100% forgiving Hachan, but he has tried to make things better. She, becomes friends with Kami very quickly. Rest of the other mermaids and everything and fishmen that they've interacted with, she ends up becoming friends with pretty quickly. And her and Shirahoshi actually end up developing a very good bond because they actually end up they've both lost their mothers, and and they were both tormented by specific fishmen. um, and everything. So like those two, Nami and Shirahoshi, kind of develop a nice little bond there, um, which is just cute. I love that little bond that develops there between the two of them. And then, of course, well, so much of this is happening. Eventually, it ends up being revealed. Horty's plan of, capture the royal family, execute them, take over the kingdom, and then kill all humans. Yeah. So all of that, as I said, all hell is breaking loose at the castle. There's been various battles with them and with the new fishmen pirates and the ammo knights and the rest of the guards and everything like that, and some of the other straw hats that are there and everything. So there's been different battles that have been going on there. They've been causing, basically, for all intents and purposes, the new fishmen pirates have basically been causing terrorist attacks around the Fishman Island. And everything, and eventually it ends up getting to the point where Shirahoshi is like, I need to go and I need to save my brothers and my father. And the Straw Hats are like, yeah, we're gonna go and help. And Jinbei was like, I told you not to help. And Luffy's like, she gave me food, I have to help. Have you read the rule book about this series? If a girl gives me food, I have to help her. Which only applies to Nami, because Nami gave Luffy food when they first met. Admittedly, it was food they stole from someone's house that they snuck into, but still, she still gave him food. So there's that. But what ends up happening is, of course, Luffy and the others end up making their way to the same plaza where Otohime was killed, years previously. And they arrive, and of course they have the nice big entrance and everything like that, where we have like the Straw Hat lineup plus Jinbei with Shirahoshi in the background for this arc. And we see that the king and the princess have been captured, and of course Shirahoshi wants to save them. While all of this is happening, Vanderdecken is doing his manipulations, and Horty is there, threatening, getting ready to execute the king and the princess. And there ends up being this moment where, as Luffy and the others are fighting against all of the different riffraff from the, new fishmen pirates, there ends up being this moment where it is revealed that Shirahoshi is actually known the whole time that Horty was the one that killed her mother, but because her mother asked her children not to seek revenge, Shirahoshi took that to heart, and she never told anyone that it was Horty that did it. And Horty, whatever. She never told anyone that he was the one that shot her mother. And he calls her stupid and gloats over this fact of just like, you could have, told everyone that was what was happened, and I would have been locked up in jail, and none of this would have been happening. So this is on you. And in all honesty, I don't think that that's entirely true, because he, as much as Shirahoshi's word would have carried a lot of weight, as the princess and everything, and it probably would have, stopped him, his crew would have kept going, and other fishmen would have still taken up this stance that Horty has, in regards to trying to, just make more hatred for humans within Fishman Island and in the kingdom and everything. So, Horty, it's just like someone else is always going to step up into that plate. Some may not be as powerful, but someone's going to take up that position regardless. So, yes, it would have been better to a degree if she had said that and stopped him and everything, but someone else would have just taken his place and caused problems anyway eventually. But now, with everything that happens at this point in time, it is being shown to the kingdom how things can be done so much better. That not all humans are bad, that so much can be made better if they just want to work alongside each other, that this type of racism that Horty and his crew have for the humans, while some of it is correct because of stuff that the Celestial Dragons have done and other people have done to the fishmen and to other, the other races within the One Piece world, of enslaving them and torturing them and everything like that, or trying to wipe them out in the case of the Lunarians and the Buccaneers and everything. That hatred toward humans is to a degree warranted, but there's so many more humans that are not those people, that are not the worst of their kind, which is the same comparison of like Hardy and all of his crew and Arlong and the ones that agreed with him and everything. Well, they are the bad examples in the Fishmen and Merfolk society. There are so many others like Jinbei and Aladdin and Shirahoshi and the princess and her family and Kami and Charlie and so many others, and Hachan, who moved past stuff into the better side and everything, of being able to show that there is good and bad no matter what tribe or what race or whatever you're from. There is good there is bad there, and that applies to our world as well. Which I actually just thought of an interesting comparison, because and this is applicable because both these characters are to a degree part of Shirahoshi's backstory, to a degree, or connected to stuff. There's Milzigard, who goes from being this horrible celestial dragon and ends up going through the transformation of meeting Otohime and everything like that, and figuring out that he can use his authority as a celestial dragon to actually try to make the world better, and he becomes better. And then you have Hachan, who of course is there at the beginning of the story, and he's part of Arlong's crew and everything, and he fights Zoro, and then he ends up escaping and helps Kami and everything, and eventually ends up interacting with the Straw Hats again, and he kind of has become somewhat of a good guy by that point in time. And of course he does apologize to Nami and everything, and he kind of goes through his own penance of like trying to watch the ship and help them as much as he can, and Nami doesn't 100% forgive him, but she gives him a second chance. And those two kind of have a little bit of a comparison there, where they've both done horrible things. I would say Milzigard has probably done much worse stuff than whatever Hachan did, but still, Hachan was still complicit in a lot of the stuff that happened to Kokoyashi Village and other villages and stuff like that. But there's a similarity that can be made there. But back into this, the whole fight ends up happening with, Luffy trying to fight against Hody and everything like that. And of course they do manage to save the princes and the king and everything. And eventually during all of this, Vander Decken shows up, and he's starting to threaten Shirahoshi and being like, marry me or I will find a way to destroy you and destroy this island and everything like that. And Shirahoshi tries to stand up to him. She tries to plead with him to spare her people and just, only try to hurt her and not her people and everything. And of course this ends up, Hody wants to try to kill her too. But what ends up happening is, of course, Vander Decken ends up touching the Noah and setting it as the weapon to attack Shirahoshi. So it starts moving towards Shirahoshi. And Shirahoshi, of course, trying to prevent it from, attacking Fishman Island, ends up swimming away from Fishman Island as fast as she can, making the Noah follow her so it won't land on Fishman Island, so she can get it far enough away from Fishman Island that if either Decken dies or gets knocked out, that the ship will not then crash onto Fishman Island and destroy it. So while she's trying to do that, Luffy is out trying to fight Hody along with Fukaboshi, is trying to help him and everything like that. And, so all of that stuff is happening at that point in time. And Hody at one point actually ends up catching up with Shirahoshi and is tries to kill her, because he wouldn't care if the ship destroyed Fishman Island, because it would just give him more power or whatever. And eventually what ends up happening is I think he ends up actually knocking out Vander Decken or whatever. And while all this is going on, Vander Decken keeps trying to demand that Shirahoshi marry him, which is no. And eventually what of course ends up happening is, of course, between Fukaboshi, Ryoboshi, Momboshi showing up to help Shirahoshi and helping Luffy and everything, they are able to defeat Hori, and then of course Shirahoshi ends up activating her power, and that results in the the Sea King showing up, grabbing the Noah with all the chains that are on the Noah, so it won't actually land on Fishman Island, because as soon as Vanderdecken was knocked out, the ship started to fall. And the ship means a lot to the people. Yes, Fukaboshi told Luffy he could destroy it if he needed to in order to defeat Hody, but it didn't come to that. So what ends up happening is, of course, they save the Noah, and they leave the Noah in the sea forest for Den to fix and everything. And of course, after this, they end up having this huge party at Shirahoshi's fine, the princes and the king are safe and everything, a bit beat up, but everybody's fine. They managed to defeat and capture all of the rest of the new fishmen pirates and everything, so they're done and taken care of. And of course, they end up all going back to the castle, and they have this huge party, which is just a lot of fun and everything. And of course, via all the talk, Caribou ends up finding out that Shirahoshi is Poseidon, that she has the ancient weapon power. He also then attempts to abduct her, which of course leads to Luffy showing up and beating the crap out of Caribou, which is fair. And then they lock him in a barrel later on. I know that happens at some point in time. And then Caribou has his own adventure, and now he's somewhere on Egghead Island, but I don't care. Well, all of, by the end of the battle that had happened between Luffy and Hody, he'd lost a lot of blood, so that's when him and Jinbei end up, doing the blood transfusion, where Jinbei is a blood donor to Luffy. And of course, what ended up happening is, of course, when they're trying to figure out who could be a blood donor for Luffy, Shirahoshi is like, I have blood, I don't know what type it is, but it's red. And she's like holding Luffy and trying to like gently set him down so Chopper can take a look at him. She's like, I don't know what kind it is, but it's red. And they're all like, as sweet and adorable as you are for that answer, we need the right type of blood or it's not going to work. So thankfully Jinbei is the right type of blood to be a donor for Luffy. So we have that. So she's present for that, as is a good chunk of Fishman Island, who witnessed the Straw Hats and Jinbei working together to try to save Shirahoshi and the rest of the royal family and try to protect their island and everything like that. Which of course immediately endears Luffy and all the other Straw Hats to the to Fishman Island, which continues to this day. So we have that, and of course eventually it gets to the point where it's like the next day or whatever, and it's time for Luffy and the Straw Hats to head out. So what ends up happening is, of course, they all get, they're all getting loaded onto the ship and everything, and all getting loaded onto the Sunny, and of course Shirahoshi shows up to say goodbye to them and everything. But she's like, could you please take me with you? And Luffy's like, no, not yet. You're still a weepy Hoshi, and you're still a crybaby and everything like that. And she's like, but I'm gonna get brave and everything. And like, they end up making the pinky promise, where it's like her giant finger and then all of their little fingers, which is adorable. Where she's, where they make the deal that Luffy and the others will return one day, that they are friends, and that they will return one day, and that Luffy will take her to an actual forest on the surface so she can see the trees and everything. And it's all the Straw Hats minus Zoro and Frankie, although I think both of them would probably end up being fine with it. I don't think that they would be like, yeah, no, we're not going back and talking with that mermaid princess again. She was boring. No. I don't think that's going to be the case. They all made the promise to a degree. It's like, yeah, the promise is there. Yes, Zoro and Frankie weren't ones that actually part of the promise, but it's still applicable to them. By technicality, Jinbei is not part of the promise either, because he wasn't a Straw Hat at the time, and he wasn't there when it happened. Well, no, I think he was there when it happened, but he wasn't like actually there trying to make the promise. Although we have now officially begun the waiting period of like, will Jinbei join the Straw Hats? He will. Give it about 10 years. 10 years in our time, and he will join the Straw Hats. So after that, the Straw Hats head off, and they head off into the New World, and they have the punk hazard that happens, and Dressrosa and everything, and then eventually we get to the Zoe arc. And during the Zoe arc, for what we see in Fishman Island is, of course, they're all getting prepared for the reverie, and Shirahoshi is trying to, psych herself up that she's going to go with her father and brothers up to Marie-Joie for the reverie, because she wants to go up there because she wants to start becoming brave and proving that she is brave so she can keep her promise to Luffy and everything. So they're all very proud of her for that, and they're all getting ready to go up there and everything. But Fukaboshi tells her that you should come for their mother's sake, not just for the promise you made to Luffy, but for their mother's sake and everything, to help try to see her dream through to the end. And then, of course, at one point during the 1,000 or the 500 million berry man arc on the cover pages, we see that Fukaboshi and Shirahoshi are watching as a bunch of kids run around wearing, little straw hats. So we have that. And then we get into the actual reverie arc where, Shirahoshi and her family are escorted by Garp to the Red Port, and then from the Red Port up to Marie-Joie. They're there. I don't know exactly how they would have picked Garp to be the one to do this, but I mean, it makes sense via story-wise because, Garp is Luffy's grandfather, and Shirahoshi just keeps calling him Mr. Luffy's grandfather, which it's not a secret to the world anymore that Garp is Luffy's grandfather at this point in time, or that his son's the head of the Revolutionary Army, in all honesty. So we have those going on there, and she's just like, is that a real forest? Is that a forest? What are those? And Garp is, being very nice, and, telling her what everything is as much as he can, and so are her brothers and everything, and she witnesses the interaction between her father and Stelly, and everything. And then, of course, they head up to Marie-Joie, up the Red Line with the Bondolas, all the way up to Marie-Joie. And, of course, they have the moment where the Neptune family are looking out at the sun as it's, beautifully shining over the ocean and everything like that as they look out and everything. And that's kind of one of those first moments where Shirahoshi, this is her first time, as far as we're aware, where she's above water, where she's at the surface, and she's just amazed by it. Probably not the first time Neptune's been to the surface, maybe not even the first time her brothers have been to the surface, but definitely the first time that they've been in this situation, because they've never attended the reverie before. And, they get their way up to Marie-Joie, and of course they're making their way up the giant steps, and with all the other royals, past all the statues, and of course into the giant, into Castle Pangaea, where they have the giant courtyard, where they're interacting with all of the other royals. And of course we have the moment where Shirahoshi ends up meeting Rebecca and Vivi, and they have that nice little interaction there, which is just adorable. And of course we have it that all of these different parents of all the different other royals are trying to set their sons up with Shirahoshi and everything, and she's just like, no, none of you are my type. Which is just the running gag with her, one of the running gags with her. And she seems to definitely she's not nearly as weepy Hoshi. She's not nearly as, crying at the drop of a hat as she was before. So she's gotten a little bit better with that. But, so she ends up becoming friends with Rebecca and Vivi and everything, as Viola and Fukaboshi and Igaram watch off from the side. So it's, connecting those three kingdoms together and everything. And then, of course, we have it that Charlo shows up, and he, of course, attempts to try to enslave Shirahoshi, which, while all this is happening, Vivi tries to step in, and Neptune is about ready to attack and everything, because he's like, I'm not letting my daughter become a slave and everything. And, of course, what ends up happening is Milzigard shows up, he intervenes, whacks Charlos across the face, and then, states, reintroduces himself to Neptune and to the royal family, that he is Milzigard, and that he's the one that went down to Fishman Island so many years ago and met Otohime and everything, and how interacting with her helped change him and make him better and make him realize that he is human and that he wants to use his authority as a celestial dragon to try to protect the royal family, the Neptune family, while they are here at Marijois. And he promises that he will stay by Shirahoshi's side in order to protect her and keep Charlos from attacking her again. And of course, then we have that Mashiri ends up healing Shirahoshi, so we have that, like, the largest princess and the smallest princess are interacting with each other, which is adorable. And then, of course, more stuff happens. Charlos, being stupid, shows up again, this time with having his father and Kuma there at the time. They show up, they try to kidnap they try to enslave Shirahoshi again, but because Sai and Leo were there, and Milzigard was like, yeah, go ahead and attack him. They attack Charlos under Milzigard's permission. And then, of course, this is when Worley shows up, gets Kuma out of there, they leave. So Shirahoshi is saved. And then, of course, we know that eventually this leads to Shirahoshi and the rest of the royal family for the Ryugu Kingdom make it out of there okay, make it out of Marijois okay, because they end up back down in Fishman Island, which we see near the end of Wano, or partway through Wano, when we have that little catch up there, that they have made their way back down to Fishman Island, where they are kind of just having tea with Garp, which is adorable. And they're just like talking about what happened with Alabasta, which of course leads us to understand that something happened with Vivi. We now know that means that they are well aware that, Cobra was assassinated and that Vivi has gone missing, and Shirahoshi is worried about her friend. And such. So that's about as far as we know at this point in time. We don't know what's going to happen next. I would like to believe that Shirahoshi has been trying to do some training with her power, now that she doesn't have to worry about having weapons thrown at her all day and night by a psycho. And she's able to actually be out among her people and interact with them and everything like that. Although, what would have been very funny, well, kind of funny, would have been is, like, if the Vaderducken still was able to keep throwing stuff at her, but she was all the way up at Marijois. And, like, the weapons, I don't remember if there's a distance range or a range limit for how far he could throw the weapon, but, like, if he, like, because he kept throwing, like, giant axes, and he, like, threw the axe at her, and it, like, threw out of his thing, out of the bubble, all the way up through Fishman Island, all the way up through the ocean, all the way just spitting as it makes its way up, up the red line. Just like people at Redport, what the heck was that? People at Marijois, the axe just keeps flying all the way up the red line until it reaches Marijois, and then tries to attack Shirahoshi, and she just, one of the brothers just come up and, like, knock the weapon away, and it lands. It's like, is Marijois under attack? The other princess go, no, she just has a very insane suitor who likes to throw weapons at her. That would make all of the other suitors just go, nope, and walk away. But I don't want that to happen, because I don't want Shirahoshi to have weapons thrown at her anymore. But what ends up happening is, of course, what we expect to end up happening is that, of course, Shirahoshi is going to hopefully keep training with her power as Poseidon, so that way she can then summon the Sea Kings when necessary, so that way, A, they can move the Noah when it's time, but B, so that way, hopefully she can help Luffy and the rest of it, Luffy and the Straw Hats, at some point in time in the future, so that way, A, Joy Boy's promise can finally be fulfilled to the original Mermaid Princess, and B, Luffy's promise can be fulfilled to Shirahoshi. So that may not be something that we end up seeing in the actual story, but that might be something that we end up seeing in, like, an epilogue at one point, or part of the epilogue, depending on how long the epilogue is. I think Shueisha will allow Oda to do, like, a longer chapter for, like, the epilogue, depending on stuff. A couple of longer chapters for the epilogue, depending on how that lands. But because there's, like, so much stuff that needs to be resolved and everything. And that would be one of the things I would hope we would see in the epilogue is Luffy and Shirahoshi, along with a bunch of the other Straw Hats and, like, her brothers and father, at the very least Shirahoshi and the Straw Hats on some island where there's this giant beautiful forest, and they're able to walk through there, and she can see the trees and everything like that as she like floats with her bubble. So hopefully that'll be something, or maybe Frankie can make her something that she can like ride around on or something like that. It's a version of a wheelchair. Frankie could make it. Frankie could make a motorized wheelchair for Shirahoshi to ride around on. It would just be really, really big. But so that I hope is part of something that happens in the epilogue, where we get to see that Luffy fulfilled his promise and that the others fulfilled their promise to Shirahoshi to help her and everything. And of course help her achieve her mother's dream of having the Fishman Island and the merfolk and the fishmen be able to live in the sunlight and be free and everything like that. Also, we kind of have to have this moment, or like as a fan base, we want there to be this moment where Shirahoshi, using her powers, ends up interacting with whatever version of the other three ancient weapons there are. We know that Pluton is underneath Wano, and that I guess eventually it could be brought to life, but we don't know how, and we don't know if there's like someone that's required to do it. And then of course there's Uranus, which could be the mother frame thing that they have, the giant sky laser that Eam has. Or something along those lines. And we want there, as a fan base, we want there to be this moment where all three weapons are in the same place at the same time again, as possibly happened in the past during, the Void Century and everything, with the war with the Great Kingdom and everything in the 20 Kings. So that's what we have here. In regards to the next section for Royals, Punk Hazard has no Royal, so there's nothing I can talk about there. Next up should be Dressrosa, where I have both the Riku family to talk about. So that would be Riku and Viola and Rebecca and Scarlet and Kyros, because Kyros is going to get thrown in there anyway because he is married into the royal family, and I'm going to talk about them. And then I will also have a video about Doflamingo in here as well. Possibly him first, and then the others. I haven't quite decided the order on that one yet. But I will do a Doflamingo one about Dressrosa. And then, of course, with that, we also have the Tontadas involved. So that would be Mancheri and her father. Mancheri and her father will be in there as well as a video for their discussion as the Tontada Royals and everything. And since there are several members of the Riku family, that'll take a little while to get through. Plus, we're coming up on Christmas and New Year's and other stuff like that, and we'll see what other stuff I have for chapters and videos and everything else like that. So that's what I have. I thank you very much. I'm going to go edit this, and then I'm going to go look at Christmas trees at the mall. So I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye!